Oh, yeah. We...
And, Stonecroft is about a 40-year-old organization, and they're struggling to find ways to invite the younger generation in.
I know.
As a result, a lot of the clubs are comprised of a lot of the older generation women, the women that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Mm-hmm. And those were the women that grew up in the generation where you didn't talk about your issues, nothing. You said nothing. Well, I'm telling you, if I can go to those clubs and share my story with no holds bar, and have those women come up to me and say, oh, I'm so glad you're sharing. I mean, if I can get their approval.
It's refreshing. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that gave me so much freedom to know that how important it was that I share, because they may have strong marriages, or they may have just tolerated their spouses. Because just because you stay married doesn't mean
for 30, 40 years. Yeah.
Right. Their generation stayed married no matter what, but they've got daughters. They've got granddaughters that are struggling with their marriages and relationships, and they're desperate for somebody to take that message to them. So even if they don't have need for my book, they know someone, because our generation, I mean, the divorce rate in the church is not any better than it is in the world.
Right.
Because even the church is conformed to the standards of the world, because we're so desensitized to it. We're watching the same TV shows. Yeah. We're doing the same things.
Well, we're wounded in the same way. And if we don't talk about how to heal, and if there, we were talking just a minute ago about the whole idea that don't look at the past. There's a chunk of our generation, I think, that just is like, oh, it's in the past. Don't look at it. Don't look at it. Well, how do you heal it and move on and help other people if you never talk about it?
Well, and here's the other thing. This is what Melinda was talking about too. You have a rear view mirror in your car, but you don't keep your gaze there. Your gaze is focused on the path ahead of you, but every once in a while, you glance back so you can avoid destruction in your future. And that's why our testimonies are so powerful about women that have had abortions. And you can't just stuff it under the rug and pretend like it never existed. Those issues in our life that need healing, we're not looking back to glorify our past. We're looking back so we can avoid destruction in our future. And it's a glance. It's not where we keep our gaze.
Christy, we were talking just a little bit ago about how do you, when you were saying that sometimes you speak to groups of older women, I was actually in a situation like this last week, and I had spoken once at noontime around lunch, and there was a fairly large group of people. It was fairly well received. In the evening, there were only about 6 new people. There were 20-some people there, but several came back, or they were the guests, or whatever. So there were only like 6 new people there. I was sharing my story about relinquishing our son and just some of the trauma that had happened during this. And literally, there were about 4 of them that I felt like looked like, as I was talking, it felt like I was devastating them. They were like, no, they didn't want it to go the way that it went. And I literally, in the middle of it, I almost wanted to just stop. And, I'm not trying to traumatize anybody by telling my story.
Right.
But what was interesting was one woman came up to me afterwards, and she was everything that I said. She went through this. She went through that. Tick, 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 tick. Yep, my life. That was my child. Yep. They were all sitting at the same table. And what floored me was nobody at the table knew this woman had been through what I had been through because they had never talked about it before.
Right.
And so she's sitting there in isolation and shame, feeling like I'm the only one that's ever been through this. And I thought sometimes, even if it's not their story, we need to be there because their friends need to hear it. Because somebody, please support this woman. Yeah. Somebody, please understand what she has lived through.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what you did. You gave liberty for her to have a way to share her story and know she's not alone. That I'm weird because I'm experiencing these feelings. Somebody else has experienced them too. And there's so much freedom in knowing that you're not the only one that's dealt with those issues.
Right.
I get so many women, the main thing they tell me after they read my book is, I didn't know that there were other women out there that felt this way. They feel so alone and isolated. It's not like you go to church and you go to the prayer line for I'm having issues, relationship issues, or there's so much shame around.
I just want to change that. I mean, what can we do to change that? Isn't church the actual place that you should be going, saying,
Yes.
I'm stuck in an affair, or I remember when we were going through this, I went up for prayer 24 weeks in a row. And why I remember the number, I don't know, but I was counting at one point, just like, what's it going to take, And I remember thinking I would crawl up the aisle on my face if that's what it took. I have no pride left. I've got nothing. I'm begging. My eyes are swollen. My face is awful. I'm overweight. My family's falling apart. I'm dying here. Would help me. And it was just like there was nothing. There was nothing. And I just think, I'm looking at you, Christy, and thinking about how desperate you must have been. And where do we go? And what as a church can change? What's it going to take to change some of this?
I think transparency. Mm-hmm. The Bible talks about being living epistles. Well, what's an epistle? It's a book. My life is an open book.
Yes.
I don't mind sharing if my story can help someone else know she's not alone. That if God can change this messed up love junkie, He can do it for anyone. And the feelings that you're feeling are not unique to you. All women experience these feelings. It's what do we do with our feelings? And where do we go to find someone else who's been there and found a way out that can help me? But instead, we've made it so easy in the church for women to start over. Sometimes they often feel it's easier to get a divorce than to admit my infidelity or admit I'm having issues with wanting to, we're not teaching women how to persevere. I mean, there are cases where obviously God releases women from divorce, but there's also cases where God wants to give them the ability to persevere. But if no one's going to stand beside them to show them how to do that.
Well, Christy, when you talked before, you mentioned that you and your first husband had separated once for a year and a half, once for another year. And I just think, first of all, I think I want to commend you on that, which may sound weird, but a lot of people think separation is strictly about, moving toward divorce. A lot of times I think, man, that's where a lot of healing can occur if it's structured, if you're each working on yourselves and trying to figure out what are the issues here so that we can change this and come back together and actually have a marriage because when you're in a very volatile place, nobody's safe. So separate from each other for a bit. And that can actually be that can be something that is used to help save a marriage. You gave it every chance that you could. It's not like you just, I'm tired, I'm moving out, I'm done. And I think that happens way too often, whereas, you were trying for 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years to make this work, and you didn't quit until you felt released.
Right, and that's the thing, because God says that He wants to complete the work that He began in each of us. But oftentimes, we're like that. We're like taking the cake out of the oven when it's just halfway done. It may look like it's done, but once you take that cake out of the oven, what does it do if it's not finished? It just falls in the middle, and it's gooey on the inside. It's messed up. It may look okay on the outside, and that's what a lot of women do when their marriages start failing. Instead of praying and saying, God, what are you trying to do through me in the midst of this adversity? Because adversity is what God uses to develop our perseverance, to develop our character.
Yes.
And then the fruit of perseverance and character is that we develop the hope that does not disappoint. Right. That's what Romans 5:3 says, that, rejoice when you go through suffering because your suffering produces something. But we want it backwards. We want to say, okay, God, give me the hope that doesn't disappoint. And then I'll have the ability to develop my character so that when I go through suffering, then I'll rejoice. We want to do it backwards, but God says, no. Suffering comes because He wants to develop something in us. But if we give up before He's completed the work that He began in us, then we're like that messed up, half-baked cake.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing that I love about your story, too, is that it didn't turn out the way you hoped.
And neither
at the beginning. No, and neither did mine.
Right.
It's, we want to say, that God will always fix things in the way that you, my hope and prayer was that my son would be healed and our family would be healed in our family.
Right.
That wasn't how it worked. And so in many ways I relate to people who have been through divorce, because that's what it in a sense is. And but from parent to child, and what a strange concept that is. It's just not talked about very often, but everywhere I'm going, and even through my book, I'm finding that there are women hiding in the shadows because of the shame and the guilt that they feel over having relinquished, which is what we had to go through. And recognizing that there is life even after, even if you can't make it through, even if it doesn't go the way you hoped and the way that you wanted it to go and the way that society believes it should go, there's still hope and there's still life after.
Well, and like, just because my first husband and I are divorced doesn't mean that we've never had a relationship since then. Like, we've got 3 kids together. So, we went through the exchanging of the children for years, with every other weekend visitation. And even though our kids are adults now, we still have a relationship. And at first, I'll be honest, I tolerated him, couldn't stand him. And then I loved him in the name of Jesus.
Aren't you holy?
But initially, honestly, I prayed, God, just kill him. Like, what's he around here for? Can you just not see what he's doing to my life?
Right.
Honestly, I prayed those prayers, and I know a lot of other women have prayed those too, because I've said that on the stage before, and I've had other women confess, I prayed the same thing. So, but today, about a couple of years ago, the Lord gave me a vision of his life restored. He gave me a vision of Bob's life on the other side of his circumstances right here. That really was like a revelation that empowered me to pray what's on the other side. So now I don't pray the circumstances. I don't say, God, heal him of his addictions. I pray, I declare God's truth over his life, that Bob has the mind of Christ, that he's, powerful in the name of Jesus. I mean, he loves the Lord. So, and it's changed the way I treat him. So now, he comes over for holidays occasionally, and instead of just tolerating him, it's literally changed the way I see him with a new grace. And it's changing the way he sees himself. And I believe that when he's restored, what a witness that'll be to my children to see a miracle of a man that's been bound in drug addiction his entire life. Completely transformed, because no one's ever believed that in him. He's grown up in a toxic environment. He's grown up with addiction. His brother and his brother has 3 boys. 2 of them have overdosed on drugs. So he's lost 2 of his children. That's how rampant drug addiction is in his family. And so the toxicity of anger management, all the issues that go along with that, no one's believed in him. No one's spoken truth in his life. And so he hadn't spoken it in his own life. So I'm believing for a miracle. I don't think God gave me that vision of his life restored just because. I believe he really wants to complete that work in Bob too.
That's good. That's good.
Well, this was fun. I actually had Brendan turn the camera back on, so I'll have to ask you. Maybe I'll send it to you and let you see what all you said, and if it's okay that we air whatever. I don't want to air anything that's not. We
turned it back on, so that's cool. Nothing I said is not cool.
Okay, cool.
So
cool.
You're still free.
Well, I just thought, you were saying you ought to have the camera on here. I'm like, well, maybe we ought to. Because sometimes in between, when we're not being so formal,
we have so much fun.
There's a lot of interesting conversations that go on that I'm like, that might be cool to share. So
All right,
thanks again.
Well, Melinda, good luck on your move, and blessings on that for you. And Carrie, I'm going to implement that Tweety thing or whatever you called it.
Tweety pie.
Someday. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you again, and I just think it's going to be fun. It's so nice to be able to, and including you on this too. I just think it's so nice to be able to talk to other people who are kind of trying to do some of the same things. Topics may be different, but using our junk and trying to help others and
I love
ways
that you
to do
said
it.
that though. Like, I feel the same where, the Lord gives you this little vision of what he's going to do in your life. And then you step back and you're like, oh, I've got the biggest ego. I can't believe I just thought that about myself. Like,
I've
who
had
am
the
I?
same thing.
Like, part of it is like, well, I'm a little unworthy. But then the other part is like, okay, that's exciting. That is exciting. But then that's where the enemy comes in and says, you are so full of yourself.
Well, but you know what? I was just thinking, I mean, how many, we are, through this, we're meeting people who all kind of have the same vision. Well, it may not be exactly the same.
Yeah.
Right.
It may be a different look. It may be a different way. But I'm just like, this is where it would happen.
Yeah.
Is amongst people
Yeah.
of like minds who all see
Yeah.
kind of the same things, because you've got people that you influence with your topic, you've got people that you influence with your topic, I've got people that, I don't know, maybe come out of the shadows here and there with my topic, but you know, we're talking to women all from different aspects, but
Yeah.
trying to achieve the same thing. And I just think, I don't know where it may go one day, you know, between who you know, it may not be together, it may, I don't know.
Well, just knowing that we all share like the same experiences of knowing that God's called you to something, beginning to move in it, and then having the enemy say, no, hold on, who do you think you are? Like, those are the things that you're kind of afraid to tell people who don't do what you do, who aren't writing books and who aren't ministering. Like, it's hard to say, well, guess what the Lord showed me? You know, like, ooh, no. I say this to my husband, or he has said something to me like, wow, you know, the Lord showed me something about you. And I'm like, la, 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 la. Like, I don't want to think like too big of thoughts, you know, but this is to know that it, like, you feel that way and you feel that way too. Like, okay, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I never would have started writing and speaking had the Lord not given me that vision, but he gave it to me a long time before I actually began acting on it, because, you know, it was years. I mean, and I think about Mary, when she conceived the Messiah, nobody believed her.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, they called Jesus a bastard child.
Yeah.
I mean, they scoffed her. But she pondered that in her heart for years. Well, think about Joseph. He was 17, but he did talk about his dream, but it came out as prideful.
Right.
But it wasn't until 22 years later that dream manifested, when his brothers came to Egypt. And, you know, so it takes a lot of time in the meantime for God to develop us.
Right.
Yeah.
So true. Well, thank you.
Yes,
Fun.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
All right,
it.
have a great weekend, y'all.
Thank you, you too.
too.
See you in
Bye-bye.
October. Bye-bye.